if you look at these periods of big influx of immigrant population, simultaneously around a recession, it doesn't tend to be good for relationships between people who have maybe been here for multiple generations and new to country. People get really ignorant really quickly. And if we do have massive job loss at the same time that there is a massive influx of new labor that maybe takes some of those jobs, I'm worried for what the fallout of that is from a political knee-jerk. People are dumb idiots.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich
Welcome to the Master Keys Podcast. I'm Chandler Haliburton.
I'm Neal and Andreino.
This is a podcast all about real estate investment. We're here in Nova Scotia. We are the biggest real estate investment podcast in Atlantic Canada. Fact-checked, proven. Write it down. We are real estate agents as well. I don't know how many $1 million worth of real estate.
$400 or $500 million.
About $500 million, I think, last check. We also have 200 plus units ourselves. So we are coming at you guys, as always, to talk about the real estate market, just the investment market in general, the overall economy, everything that's going on in our world, to try to give some insight on how it's influenced our thinking and what we're doing in the investment space, and also just, learn from you guys, the audience. If you find anything you think is interesting, do not forget to like. Please subscribe. We see the data behind the scenes. A lot of you watch the show, but don't necessarily press that little ringy thing at the bottom. It does make a huge difference to us. So thank you so much. And we got some interesting stuff to chat about here today.
Yeah, thanks guys for tuning in. We really, really appreciate it. It's been growing a lot. I just want to say that because we've been getting back the numbers and things are finally starting to go. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about our own personal news because we haven't done that in a long, long time. Yeah. And some of you guys have been asking for an update. And then we're going to be going on about what's taking place in the States. There's some changes in their rental rates.
Yeah.
Kind of opposite to Canada. And then on the flip side, Canada's having a boom because they're expecting lots more people.
Yeah, so you've probably seen a couple of these things in the news. And interestingly, as we're recording this right now, the Fed is going to do another announcement sometime within the next 60 minutes that we're recording this. So we'll have an update on that. All the indicators are that it's going to be 75 points. But we remember that was kind of the thought, or at least some of the thought out there with the last Canadian hike, and they only went to 50 points. I think the U.S. situation might be a little bit more dire. I think they probably are going to go to 75 points. The market's already building that down. I saw something like NASDAQ's already down 1% on expectation of this news. But having said that, let's start here in Canada with that migration stuff.
Yeah, so exactly. The Canada side is a little different. Like you said, it sounds a little more promising than the States. So the Fed just announced that they're expecting to do 500,000 people immigrating into the country in 2025. To put that in perspective, I guess they're saying last year, which I think is really this year, was 400,000.
Yeah.
The coming year is 465,000, 2024. And then for 2025, they're expecting 500,000 people. I'll say right up the front because every podcast...
You nailed it, Neal.
Yeah, I've been screaming that they're going to... I'm still not convinced that this is for sure. Things can change. Things can change. Tell me things can change. Tell me things can't change. But a bunch of people messaged after the last episode and the last couple episodes where I'm like, the only thing I can see them doing is freezing up immigration if they don't come up with a plan to help people build housing. But let me finish on why they're saying they want to crank up this immigration number, and that's because they want to fight job vacancy. And Tiff mentioned it there when he was saying the inflation numbers are crazy, but they really want to be careful with runaway wage growth. And so one way to try and control runaway wage growth on top of increasing interest rates is to have a ton of people available, because if there's more people available, especially skilled people, it'll bring down the job vacancy and hopefully keep wages where they need to be. And so they're saying there's upwards of 1 million vacant positions that they need to fill. And so they're trying to bring in as many people as they can with a preference for skilled immigrants to try and fill in these positions. And Atlantic Canada, which is local to us, we're expecting a 40% bump. So the rest of Canada is expecting about a 20% bump. They're expecting a 40% bump in the direction of Atlantic Canada with immigration. So it should be interesting.
So I love... I was gonna actually tease you about how you really had your finger on the pulse with this one. Neal goes, "Oh, they're gonna slash immigration," and then they announce a big push towards increased immigration.
Don't worry, the rest of the audience did that for you.
Well, this is this double-edged sword, and we talked about this before. You want to bring in people to fill these job vacancies, and I heard a stat out of the States of something like there are 1.9 available job postings for every one person looking, and this is why. How do you slow down the economy when the labor market is that robust, that shortage of supply, that high demand, whatever you want to call it? It's just going to continue to drive wages higher. if you're looking at it from a positive perspective, maybe that lends itself towards this soft landing. We had a question from someone asking about soft landing. Well, if we could get inflation somehow under control, we may not have the big unemployment that typically accompanies a recession. Right? Like typically, unemployment goes above the normal rate during a recession, but we could, because we're so oversaturated, we're so overemployed, that we could have a situation that we are able to pull down these prices while keeping unemployment in the healthy range. But these things tend to move in opposite direction. Like you need unemployment to slow inflation.
Now, here's my one concern with it is that, on to the unemployment fact, I'm not going to say it's just because this is a housing podcast, but we need the housing for these people. We have the housing crisis.
Yeah.
And with the costs and the rates and everything the way they are now, it's very difficult for a developer to provide affordable housing or for someone to afford a home. And I just heard that home builders in this city are starting to do mass layoffs. I've had three calls this week alone that some of the largest developers and home builders in this city are beginning with layoffs, which this is where...
These would be presumably like subtrades that they would have brought in-house, and now they're probably...
Exactly. So they're starting to cut loose a lot of their subtrades that they had in-house to try and reduce costs and to increase their efficiency, on and on and on. But so people are starting to make those layoffs. So they need to do something to incentivize housing. Like, this is, again, this is where they need to offer developers and builders and these kinds of people with, like, whether it be a tax break or cheap money or something, because what's going to happen here is those job vacancies, the job postings are going to start to drop, right? Because it's more costly for money. A lot of companies are going to start to pan down. Like, this is going to, again, remedy itself faster than we think. Like, it's, we have 1 million job vacancies, so we need 1 million people. No, I bet you of those 1 million job vacancies, a quarter, if not half of those, will end up getting sucked up by the fact that people are actually going to start slowing down on their spending, and these companies are going to start to remove some of these job postings.
Right.
Additionally, there's going to be companies that are laying people off, so they're going to fill up the other spaces.
That's kind of the hope, as sick as it sounds, right? Like you need that, you need layoffs, you need people to stop hiring effectively to get this under control. The problem is the obvious double-edged sword is you bring in all these people and we have nowhere to house them. Because here's the thing, like we brought in somewhere like upper 400,000 people so far this year, or we're on track for that. So to target more people than that moving forward, we haven't solved the situation for the people we have, even just domestically, let alone new PRs, because these are all going to be permanent residents. The other thing is we bring in, I don't know, 150, 200,000 international students and people on like working visas.
Mm-hmm.
So call it 650,000 people, give or take a year.
Yeah.
We've seen that really aggressively here locally, the challenge with student housing. And not to dwell too much on our own municipality, our own provincial government, but they're now looking at ways to effectively have privatized student housing options and how to fast track those things. I don't know if you saw that, that's coming down the pipe too. Like we can't house the students, but we're going to continue bringing in 150 to 200,000 international students and work visa folks. We can't house our own people, but we're going to bring in 450 to 500,000 new PRs every year. And yes, we need them to fill these labor roles, but like this is a chicken and the egg, like classic problem we have on our hands here.
What just question for you? What percentage of the Canadian population do you think is considered to be? I think it's first-gen immigrant.
Oh gosh, what would it be? Second generation? How's that work? Is the first generation
not born in Canada, but living in Canada?
Gosh, I've already guessed.
What percentage of our current population?
Let's see. We're up from 30 million to, I think we're about 40 million right now.
It's the matrix right now. There's numbers flying around Chandler's head.
No, but
around 40 mil.
So we're up probably about 10 million in the last 15 years. Most of that's going to be immigration. So I don't know. I would say around 25 to 30%.
I hate that was actually how that worked out. But yeah, I think it's 26%. Oh, God. I regret my question. I'd like to take that
Episode
back.
Over.
We're going to cut that section out.
So if you guys want to unpack, I'm going to unpack the math because I'm feeling
if you divide 10 by 40.
Right? No. So I don't know. I don't have the population here, but I remember about 15 years or so, like we were always right around 30 to 32 million.
30, exactly.
And now we're right around 40. So we've grown by, I don't know, 10 million people over this last 15 or so years. People are going to hammer those stats because I don't have Google here in front of me.
Yeah.
But domestically, that's not from us having babies. It's not. Like we are not reproducing. The Western world in general is not reproducing at a rate that actually moves the needle and
Our
grows
birth
the
rate's
population.
lower than our death rate.
Yeah. So that growth had to be effectively 100% migration. And so then I just did a little bit of math, a little numerator denominator, and I came up with that
Moving
bang on stat.
forward, as I say, what's happening in response to this? Go ahead.
Okay.
No, tell me.
Well, this lent me to my other thought, and we've said this before. You and I are very much pro-immigration because we think that is a big part. That's a big economic driver for
It
our
is
country.
our main. Yeah.
It's our main economic driver. Okay. Like there is another way to grow population, and that is for people to have more kids. And that's a novel
How do they
idea.
incentivize
I know.
that?
You make it affordable for one parent to stay at home, or you make it more affordable to have childcare. You make it more affordable to have children, period. It is very expensive to have kids. They're expensive little buggers.
This is a big topic, and I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole, but do you think people are not having kids because of an affordability issue?
I think in some cases yes. Short answer, yes. And maybe it's more the difference between having 2 kids and 3 or 4, but that does have implications to your population growth.
Interesting. Do you think I like this one? Like, I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole, but the percentage of women that are working now, it changes. Like, because I see a lot of them. They're like, if I have a kid, it screws up my whole career.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
I feel like that's a big one now. Like, I feel like the last gen prior to us, the percentage of that would be so much different.
And some of that has been changing societal values, right? I think more women are career focused than maybe 2 generations ago because of what society embeds in people and gender expectations and all that sort of stuff. But I think also people often need 2 household incomes now to live.
Totally.
Right? So if either person wanted to, whatever partner, if one partner wanted to stay home, it may not be feasible.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
and if
sure.
you have a brood of children, someone probably needs to stay home because you are going to have differing ages and it's just not economically feasible. So you could argue that if everything wasn't so damn expensive, we would actually have more population growth because people could afford to have larger families. They could afford to have children earlier. A lot of the other reason that people aren't having as many kids is because they can't get out of crippling student debt until they're like 30. And who wants to bring
whipping out the student debt card?
Well, no, like
I'm just messing
we
with you.
start our people off,
Yeah, no, I get
behind
you.
the 8 ball, and so you can't start thinking about kids until you're in a financial, solid situation, or at least most people think
I'd
that
be
way.
curious what the difference between the birth rate in Canada and the States would be, because in the States you have way more student debt.
And that's like one little factor, but I'm just
No,
saying,
I
like,
understand.
Like we have
I'm
set
just thinking
people
that.
up to make it very financially hard to have children, and
Do you think they should have an incentive to do so? Do you think it's better that we start producing in-house or the imports?
producing in-house. We want to bring
Look at them
children
as a
production
commodity.
back home. Well, like human capital is a commodity for sure. I think an incentive. I mean, that sounds so weird to be like,
Give you
it's
$2,000 a
incentive
month
to
if you
have
have a
kids.
kid.
However, there
Canada
are
have,
things like
14 kids.
child allowances and stuff like that. I think the incentive would be making childcare more affordable. I
People are gonna
think
get appraisals on their kid
trying to
income.
get the cost of living down a bit and all these things. Yeah. Anyway, this just got me thinking that there are other ways to grow your population, but
You have digressed.
I have digressed. And again, we're very much pro-immigration, and I understand your school of thought, which is that you think there's going to be pushback against immigration because of the housing issue. It's not obviously coming with this particular government, and whether that's because this is the government's philosophy, or if this is because they generally feel we need the labor, or if it's because they think
my
these new
God.
voters almost...
Look at this water delivery.
You know-
What is up?
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Look at that.
Thanks, producer Mark.
There's also always that cynical aspect that the government in power sometimes likes upping immigration because the sooner they can get those people to be voters, the better, because they're more likely to vote for the party that brought them into the country.
Let me hit you with this scenario.
Okay.
They give you $1,000 a month for each kid you have. You have
Okay.
like 10 kids living in your house.
Okay.
You appraise your house based on income approach.
Oh my God, I
Bring in
love it.
$10K a month.
What's the multiplier effect on this? On
Imagine.
this set of twins I got?
People are going to be leveraging their homes for millions and millions. The average house in Canada is going to go up to like $5 million.
Yeah.
I
It's like, listen, it doesn't have a walkout basement, but it does come with 2 kids.
Built-in bunk beds.
No, I mean, like, these are just interesting things to think about if we're going to have this conversation. If we really have this thing glaring in our face where we have to decide what our population growth looks forward. And do you remember I talked about this one time? Because think of all these challenges and these questions we have, and then realize that our population as a world, like the entire Earth's population, is crescendoing right now.
I know.
It's
Elon
about
Musk
to roll
is very
over,
concerned.
right?
Yeah.
So we are soon going to have declining global population.
Which is very sketchy.
And everything, including our own economy, is predicated on more people, and we're going to be competing for the world's people. So maybe we're just getting a head start on everyone. Maybe that's the idea with this. But how's it going to affect housing?
Well, to bring it all the way back to Halifax.
Long walk.
That was a long walk. And we're all the way back now to Halifax. We have people living in tents, and we've already known this, and it's happening across the country. It's happening across the states. Pretty much in most first world countries, it's taking place. And so this was just announced that Halifax has assigned a new tent location in Lower Sackville, which is a neighborhood here. It's a baseball field. They have 8 tents set up there.
I think I've already seen them there, yeah.
Have you? Yeah, they were originally down the road.
Yeah.
Well, people were interviewing people that are at the site, and there are people there with full-time jobs. So, like, this is the problem with bringing in so many people, and they're like, look, I was renting a hotel, and now they will no longer extend my stay after 3 months. And so now I'm literally here. And I'll be honest with you, I've had applicants that saying, we're in a tent right now, and we need an apartment. But it's a tough one on the receiving end. Like, I'm like, okay, of course I want to house these people, but then it's always like the question of like, is there something more to the story? And so there's a bunch of issues with that. It's like a moral dilemma. But this is where I go back to my whole thing of like why I think they might have to curb immigration. It's not because I want them to curb immigration. Like, I'm a second-gen immigrant myself. It's because I'm like, we are now having, and everywhere I went for coffee this morning in the park across the street. Literally between every single tree, there was a tent. I drive anywhere there's like parkland in any of the downtown locations. I see them like snugged deep within the bushes all the way along our waterfront on the Dartmouth side. There are like literally, we can see it out behind us right now. There are tents snugged everywhere. So again, this immigration idea is amazing, and we are in the industry of basically people, and we need it, but we're doing nothing on the housing side to do this. It's great. Look, okay, maybe we don't need more industry within our country because we have some job vacancies, so we can actually employ all these people that are coming. What are we going to do with all these people that are coming? And they said the Fed's like, well, we're hoping they're going to go to more auxiliary areas. And I'm like, looking at Nova Scotia, the auxiliary areas are also totally and even looking at the auxiliary areas in Nova Scotia, they are full. Like Amherst is like, we need someone to come here. We will give you the land for free to build. New Glasgow, same thing. We're like, we'll pave. I think Amherst said they'll pave the roads. New Glasgow said they'll give the land away for free. Sydney's also on like the same mindset of like, we have great land. We'll sell it to you for very cheap with the right plan. So I don't know. This is I just wanted to put that in there. Like, where is this going? Again, immigration's amazing. I'm all for it. But where's the incentives to get some housing, or the government needs to just step up and build it themselves?
That's the only solution, but whatever. We pounded that drum. So I've a couple thoughts on all that because that's all really interesting and sad in a lot of cases. With Sackville, like, you can always understand the situation around Halifax, like downtown Halifax and downtown Dartmouth. Yeah. Because easy transit, hospitals, support. This is why, unhoused people tend to move towards major centers. To see it in a place like Sackville is a little bit more jarring because
you're 35 minutes from downtown.
Yeah, and so those are displaced individuals from literally within what some people call like a suburb. Right? Like it's kind of a bedroom community to Halifax for people who aren't familiar. While there is the Cobequid Medical Center there's not as many things that you would think of in terms of resources and things available to these folks. So it's not a situation of they've come from other areas and all kind of accumulated in one area and increased that density. These are people who presumably were in apartments in Sackville up until just recently. So it is quite jarring to see that. It comes down to supply, man. Like, there's no vacancies
There
anywhere.
was also discussion of fear of being moved because they found that when they went to the encampments within the peninsula, that once they became too dense, then the city would intervene. And so there's a hope that like if we can keep this to a small group of 10 or 12 of us,
Yeah.
they might not move us around as much.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, in my passing by those tented areas, they were some of the, I hate to say this, but like tidier and
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
whereas some of the ones here in town have unfortunately gotten a little bit in rougher shape. So I can understand them saying like, no, we feel comfortable here. This is also the community that we're used to. We want to stay there. Yeah.
One thing I want to say that I think like makes a lot of sense, and we've said it before. Why don't they just say like, boom, emergency action team, we take a piece of surplus land and we just build a properly sized building to house like a homeless shelter, basically. Why can't they just go out and build something like that immediately? They've done these temporary city or even like
the city has one. They have no housing mandate, so they don't have any funds.
The province,
earmarked
then
for
I
it,
guess,
right? And they can't do it on land that's not theirs. And most of the vacant land that you can think of that's actually
province
near
land.
resource is province owned.
I understand. When I say city, I mean city or province.
Yeah. Why does the province do it?
Either party, why don't they step up to the plate? Because realistically, the amount of money that needs to go out, like,
I mean, the provincial government is too concerned with buying your votes by like blocking Nova Scotia power rate hikes and rent control. That's what their focus is on.
True.
So
I just don't understand the insanity at this point. This is not like a new issue that's been happening. It's been years now. And I'm like, if they had started some sort of project, we would have
Oh my
something.
God.
Even their temporary encampments took like a year to build, and their trailers that are in a parking lot.
if they had started an 80-unit dwelling on the same date that they started those temporary, that search for those temporary units, they would be fully occupied by the spring. Not now, but by the spring, they'd be fully occupied, those 80 units. And realistically, they wouldn't even do 80 units. They'd probably do like micro suites that 80 actually ends up with like 160 bedrooms. Like that would have been done in this spring if they had started it back then.
Is there a single permanent structure under construction to help with this?
Gosh, that's a phenomenal question. I think there's some like co-op and housing trust stuff.
Co-ops and housing
but they're
trusts.
small, 6
exactly.
units here, 12 there, maybe 18 here.
That's the stuff that I think is insanity to me.
They're waiting for the private sector to bail them out while at the same time just demonizing the private sector in the media.
That's what I mean. Like, how can the private sector bail them out if they're going to hammer them with all the, like you said, regulation constantly and demonizing them?
Yeah.
Like anyways, I saw that and I was like, this is nuts that we continue to kind of just operate and people aren't pushing harder on this. And somehow I'm surprised it doesn't take more media hold that like this is taking place. And meanwhile, everyone's fired up. They're like, oh, Timmy stepped up to hit.
Doesn't click
Mara.
well. Here's my other concern. And I hate to put this out to the universe because I'm worried that it's going to be true. If you look at these periods of big influx of, immigrant population simultaneously around a recession, it doesn't tend to be good for relationships between people who have maybe been here for multiple generations and new to country. People get really ignorant really quickly. And if we do have massive job loss at the same time that there is a massive influx of new labor that maybe takes some of those jobs, I'm worried for what the fallout of that is from a political knee-jerk. People are dumb idiots when it comes to this stuff.
People are dumb idiots, and they are completely irrational and ignorant in some of the stuff that they say and do and how they act. But one thing I'll say that I see, and I can see how people, like, it will heighten their, let's say, anger, is that, like, I have immigrant workers working for me right now. They're not under my payroll, but they're through companies that I hire. And those companies are getting payroll incentives to hire the immigrants. And so it makes more sense for them to hire an immigrant than it does to hire a local person.
Right. And no one cares right now because all the local people that want jobs kind of have jobs.
They also all have jobs. But again, once, like you said, it turns over.
Yeah, once they don't have the jobs.
And they get laid off because they cost twice as much as the immigrant worker next to them who just came here.
Yeah.
Like, is that's, and then
I'm just
see
worried
where
that's a powder keg. Like, I spent a lot of time in Europe right after they opened the EU, and all the Eastern Europeans like flocked to England, and like the tension was palpable in some instances.
Yeah.
Very, highly densely populated country. a very traditional country in a lot of sense because the whole colonial history of Great Britain, like all that stuff was there, and then this massive flux of immigrants at a time when then things fell off a cliff in the EU, and you look at some of the rise in nationalism, conservatism, and all these like far right. It coincides with some of that, and you hate to envision something like that in our country. But I just worry if we have a recession at the same time as we bring in a bunch of immigrants, I could see that being.
They can fix all this.
All right, fix it, Neil.
Just give us some housing incentives. We'll do so much construction that everyone gets a job. Jobs for you, jobs for them, jobs for all of us. Everyone's super pumped.
You get a job. You get a job.
Everyone gets a job. Rents come down. There's housing all over the place. No issues.
Yeah.
Done. Fix it.
And inflation continues at all time highs.
And inflation continues at all-time highs. But it's sweet because you buy something today and then you can return it tomorrow for more money. Think about it. Right now, people love it. You can buy a car and then you drive for 2 years and you bring it back and get more money than you paid.
Money's imaginary. Just keep kicking it down.
I mean, it literally is.
I mean, we're getting into some like crazy.
Anyways, yeah, we have digressed. I want to say I'm going to flip this around now, and I mentioned this when we started the episode that the opposite is happening in the States, and what I meant by that is their rental rates are decreasing in over 50% of 100 major centers. So they took 100 major cities, over 50% of them, their rental rates have begun to decrease. For the first time in, I think, 2 years, 20% are stagnant. So that's probably almost 75% are effectively flat or going down.
Now, some of this is seasonal, but keep
and
going.
The 25, well, and that's 25% of it is the last remaining, I'll say the high-end markets are continuing to go up. But the places that dropped the most were just on the outskirts of the high-end area. So places like LA, San Fran, New York, Florida. Those cores, the cores have remained strong, but auxiliary markets just outside of that are not doing so hot.
Well, that's interesting, and we have a Patreon episode about some of the pros and cons of investing in secondary markets.
Yep.
Right, so check that out. Okay, two things.
This is kind of sketchy. Like this is why the States is a whole different animal. You got rates going down, or interest rates going up.
Yeah.
Rental rates going down. So if you own,
job market's still through the roof, though.
Job market's through the roof.
But here's the thing. I think that's a bit of a BS stat. We have to follow that a little bit because people forget.
It's purely seasonal.
You know as well as I do that rental rates are seasonal. Rental rates always go down in the fall, always since the dawn of time.
They're not going down anywhere here.
It's
slower. It's slower. I'll say it's slower.
Yeah, I would. I don't know. We don't have. I don't know if you have any data here locally, but I've heard anecdotally from people like, man, I'm having trouble filling my unit right now. Like, and some of that is maybe people want the creme de la creme, and so many what you'd call blue chip tenants. I don't know what term to use, but like they're if they're in their unit, they're happy with it. They're not moving.
But on the side note, we're also saying that there's people sleeping in tents. There's way too many people here.
Yeah.
We can't house all the people.
Yeah.
So even with the seasonal movements, realistically, we should not be facing things going down.
Well, if people
we're
don't
saying
have the
record
money,
low
they don't
vacancies.
have the money, right? Like, how
There's-
come,
but
how
some
come
of these
housing
people-
prices aren't
I mean-
still going up, right? Well, because people can't afford the houses, right? There are people who need houses, but they can't afford them, so the price can't go up anymore. I think some of that is going to be seasonal. I do think, though, it's inevitable, right? Like, people are getting squeezed. They have to be mindful of their budget. And I do think a lot of tenants are hunkering down. I'd be really interested to see the turnover rate of tenant. Like there was a time as a tenant, you would hop from building to building. You're like, no, I'm in this. Oh, this building's a little newer. And as landlords used to give away
shop the best deals.
a free TV and 1 month's rent. Do you
remember those? Yeah, in Clayton Park. Yeah,
they'd go to Clayton Park. They build a new building, and what they do is they'd give you a free TV and 1 month of free rent to move from the building down the street to the new building. And they would often have your mailing address because chances are they were the same builder that built the one down the road. And what they would do is they'd build them, get them to 95% occupancy, refi, or they would sell it to a REIT because their contract would say, listen, as soon as you
their tenants.
Exactly, as soon as you have 90% occupancy, we'll buy it. And then they would just steal the tenants from their old previous building. Anyway.
I mail all of Chandler's tenants.
So... like that was a thing, but I think right now tenants are saying, I've got a good thing. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm not moving. right? Maybe I'm in a month to month and I've got rent predictability. Maybe I just kind of like my place. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Maybe they've got an awesome landlord like Chandler. I'm
I'm just surprised that there's that many people that are like, housing's your number one item, and I understand the affordability issue, but I figured people would bite the bullet and say, I need a unit, and I would try and cut elsewhere before being like, I'll live on a couch, or I'll live in my parents' basement, or I'll live in a tent. You know what I mean? Like, I understand not buying, because buying is not necessarily a necessity, but I figure that people wanting a roof over their head, that's why I think renting to me is more concerning. The housing market, I feel like 50% of buyers are trying to time the market. You know what I mean? Because everyone looks at it as their biggest asset. And so right now, I think a lot of people are holding off, mixed because, they can't afford where they want it to be, but also because everyone's trying to time the market and they don't want to catch a falling knife.
Yeah.
When you sign a lease, you're like, well, I can leave in a year, or I can leave in 6 months, or whatever it may be. Yeah. They're just like, I need somewhere to live.
So you think rates are still going up here locally?
Rental rates?
Yeah.
I would say rental rates are continuing to climb. I think we did go through a little bit of a slow period.
Comment below if you've been renting a place recently, like if you've been turning over some of your units. Comment below what. I'm sure you're still getting the rates, but there's a big difference. Like you can start seeing the shoe drop, and it was the same in the real estate market on sales. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're still getting our like 50 over, but rather than 15 offers, there was only 6.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, are the number of showings dropping? I'd be curious to hear what people say. Just comment below.
It'll shoot back up when we have this many with the 500,000 people coming.
Oh yeah. Next, like, I remember when we talked about the housing situation, and I even had this conversation with some tenants who were moving out of a new building that I purchased. Was like, you realize it's bad now. In August, when the students arrive, it is going to be impossible. And all of these new people next year, we thought it was bad this year. Like, how many students are stacked on top of each other or had to go back home? And interestingly, across the board, almost every single university in Nova Scotia was down on enrollment. I think there was one that maybe stayed about the same. All the rest were down.
Yep.
Where are they going to go next year? Where are they going to go?
What was the reasoning for the enrollment reduction?
I think that's probably a loaded question, but I think, we were here and we were screaming about how the whole university factory system is flawed. I think people are starting to feel that way.
Do you think that general idea is starting to slow? And they're also, like, nowadays there's a lot of career options that are outside of the university path?
100%.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm speculating. I know sometimes there's some ebbs and flows about, Atlantic Canadian universities have a big draw for a little while, and then it comes back down, and then people are going elsewhere. But
they're going to have to modify curriculums to try and recapture people's intention. Maybe you'll see shorter programs. I feel like that will be a big change, is shorter programs, because a lot of programs, people are like, what I learned in year 1, and now I'm coming out in year 5, and it's irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that said, so I can do a 5-year arts degree and struggle to get employment, or I can do a certificate in project management and get hired at any contracting company, any GC.
You can probably get them to cover.
They probably pay for it. Yeah,
courses.
Yeah,
and
I'm not dumping on arts because I've got a couple arts degrees. I'm saying, but like, it's 5 years to get something that is harder to take to market in the marketplace we've had over the last 2 years.
Oh yeah.
Whereas you could get a bunch of certificates and go out there and, make bank day one. Right.
100%. I saw the same in my class, engineering degree, and we all thought that it was going to be easy peasy getting a job, and it was not. It was not. I'd say 50% of the class walked out with a job. The other 50
became
time.
realtors.
For my class specifically, maybe. But yeah, so no, I get that. Okay, interesting.
Oh my gosh, you know what I didn't mention off the top?
No, what didn't you mention?
MKR #1, baby.
I was going to bring that up in our personal news.
Okay,
yeah,
we'll get to it.
We'll get there. What do you got?
Hey, thanks for listening until this point. As always, like, follow, subscribe, questions down below. Makes a world of difference. And we try to get back to them. We're actually releasing a couple episodes where we answer specifically your questions, so please put them down below. We've got a lot of great stuff in the second half. We're actually going to dive into a new purchase that Neal is making. Well, we're going to tease a little bit about it, and I'm going to talk about where I'm at on my projects. So, yeah, stay tuned. More after this break. Well, everyone likes to rag on the boomers. Right, the boomer generation boomer situation. There's something that I came across called the boomerang generation.
What's the youngest a boomer can be? Do we know?
Well, the baby boomers were post-war, right? So, like I don't know. My mom was born in 1950, and she's kind of like at the end of the boomers. Like she's a bit young to be a boomer.
Bring up the boomer generation, but continue.
Yeah, I think boomer generation is probably like 44 to 49, kind of if you're born in there. Give or take. Anyway.
Sorry, I just got a message. I'm just checking out here.
Neil's just gonna
I'm just quit
check
the
his phone
podcast. See
for
you
a
guys.
little bit. Yeah, so the boomerang generation,
Boomer
which
generation.
is between 2001 and 2016, multi-generational homes were the fastest growing type of household in Canada.
1946 to 64.
1946 to 54? Okay.
64.
That's ridiculously broad. But so now about 6% of the Canadian population live in multi-generational adult homes. So this isn't talking about like parents living with their kids unless their kids are adults, right? So adult children.
I missed the first part of this.
Okay. Yeah, get off your cell phone, bud.
I'm off.
Between 2001 and 2016, multi-generational homes were the fastest growing type of household in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It grew, like it almost grew by 40% in that time period.
Mm-hmm.
But now about 6% of Canada's population live in multi-generational adult homes.
Mm-hmm.
And this doesn't include duplexes and triplexes. So this doesn't include if like two generations bought a duplex and one lives upstairs and one lives downstairs. No, they're talking about like one dwelling having multi-generations of adults, including in a lot of cases, grandchildren living with grandparents, which I thought was really interesting.
You said it grew the fastest in 2001 or 2021?
In that range, that period of 15 years, it was the fastest growing type of living arrangement in Canada.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, again, I think that is I think purely that's on an affordability basis. I think. I don't know. I was gonna say like there's a lot of.
I see it a lot now. Like I've had people say like, listen, we want this situation. We want space in the basement for parents to live here one day. Maybe now, maybe 5 years from now when they sell their place.
Yeah.
But I see people increasingly thinking about that. Siblings going in, buying a property. I've even seen like couples, or two individuals, two single people even, cohabitating and buying in order to increase their purchasing power. It all comes back to affordability, obviously.
So, I think for affordability is one of the biggest drivers for it. I think it's also partially with immigrant families.
Yeah,
if
that's
included in that
interesting too.
stat.
That's interesting too.
It's very common for immigrant families to do this.
Yeah.
Culturally, it's the norm for parents to live with kids, raise the kids, and then the kids
I hadn't thought about
effectively
that,
take
but
over and keep the parents around and take care of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, I think the general culture, even for North Americans, has changed a little bit where it's more okay and less looked down upon to keep your kids in your home or keep the kids close by. Like, I think 40, 50 years ago, maybe 60 years ago, it would have been very like, oh, like what's wrong with your kid? He can't go out and get his own house and his own job.
Totally.
And now it's not considered that. It's like, yeah, like my parents at home, my parents maybe need a bit of assistance or whatever, and so they live in an ensuite or an in-law suite. That's considered to be much more normal now.
And even in some cases considered being savvy and smart with your money and why spend it if you don't need to, and parents being like, why are you going to just pour your money out for rent? But it's called the boomerang generation, which I thought was super clever because it's the children of boomers who often leave the nest, university, do whatever, stay in res, maybe have an apartment, and then move back. And in the States, young adults between 25 and 34, the number living with parents or grandparents doubled from 7% up to 18%. So 18% of young adults 25 to 34 have moved back in to live with their parents and grandparents. And if you count those that also live with siblings, it's up to 21%. So 21% of young adults between 25 and 35 in the U.S. are living with either their parents, their grandparents, or their sibling.
I don't have kids, so I've never considered this. You have kids.
I do.
What is your thought in your head? Are you wanting your boys when they turn, they're going to watch this back and be like, Dad, you said.
I just don't want my mother-in-law to watch this. The boys can move back in. I don't want Karen moving in.
What?
Love you, Karen. I'm just kidding.
You're getting in shit for that. What do you, in your head, how do you see it going with your boys? Like, you mentioned, I think you've mentioned on here before that you had an interest of at least them being in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Potentially being in like a duplex style property that's it's close by. Like, how do you see things going? So
I've mentioned this to a bunch of people and probably on here. Like, I have a real concern about where my children will be able to afford to live. Like, I think I know where I want to live my days.
Yeah.
And that's the damn house I live in now. I'm going to leave there feet first on a gurney. And then ideally I'm going to be buried in the yard.
Oh no.
You know, and
Resale value just went to zero.
and then the kids can take over the house and do whatever they want, hopefully keep it. But so that's where I want to live. And the concern becomes like, where are my kids going to live?
That'll be an expensive neighborhood when your kids go to buy.
Yeah.
It's already an expensive neighborhood.
Exactly. So I have a couple properties that part of me is just keeping because I want them to live there one day. And I don't want them to be paying someone else for rent. I want to help them.
So you are
off
going to
this
leverage the income from your kids.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I'm going to make them pay me rent. No.
Look. I'll give you $2,400 for the first 6 months.
Well, that's
and then
fine,
there's an
but,
escalation clause in there.
Randy's offering me 25, and he is the oldest.
Would you want them to live in the house with you? Like, you have enough space, I would say, in your house now to potentially, or enough space on your lot to maybe build an addition. Would you look at doing that?
We've got a guest suite like upstairs already that, I think it would make sense. I think at some point will want a little bit of separation from us, but like every now and again, my youngest will say something cute like, "I think I'll probably just live with you guys, maybe in the attic." And I'm like, "I love you so much. You can stay with us forever." So I don't know. Like I wouldn't care, but I would love for my children to spread their wings one day, move out on their own, maybe start a family of their own. But I want it to be close by to me. And if that means giving them a friggin' property across the street, then that's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
And maybe that's nepotism, whatever. Who cares? If you have kids, you get it. Like, you love those little buggers and you want them close to you and you want them with whatever help you can provide them.
When your knee's weak, back sore, do you have an expectation for your kids to be around to help you out?
Yeah, I mean, Shay'll probably leave me out to dry, but Randy will take care of me. Randy will wipe the spit off my chin for sure. Yeah, you know what? I don't think about that. I hope I just like work him and healthy up until the moment I drop dead.
No, and
that's my plan.
I'll tell you why I ask. I would say culturally for me, the expectation, at least how I see it, and I'm sure I'm going to get some comments on this, but is
your mom was moving back in with you?
I mean, she would love that, I think, honestly, or at least with the same thing within the same street or in her own separate space on like a large lot.
Yeah.
And there is, I think, an expectation culturally for me to support as time goes on, and I want to as well. But I think there is a genuine expectation that I should be there to do that. And so,
yeah, of course.
And again, like I said, I think a big part of that stat is on top of the affordability. I think it genuinely is a lot of immigrant families you will see are doing that. And I bet you a lot of them are afraid to even report it. So I bet you that's a higher percentage than we think.
Well, here's another thing that's interesting about this living situation. And let's take, for example, the grandkid living with the grandparent. The grandparent is also experiencing a pinch with respect to expenses. Right? Like, they may have their property tax capped, but their food budget's going up, their heating budget's going up, and they're on a fixed income in most cases.
Yeah, true.
So actually getting the younger roommate who happens to be, your 26-year-old grandkid is pretty sweet. And then you get that fact of like, there's one thing that we don't do in our crazy society anymore, which is actually to like, I was going to say talk to old people.
Jesus, speak for yourself, Chandler.
We don't have as much generational wisdom passed down as I think we once did. And there's a lot of societies out there that do a way better job of learning from their elders and hearing their elders. And so there's this thing called effectively elder loneliness and isolation.
Yeah.
And
100%.
So while it must be a real change for them to have this 20-something move back into their house, I'm sure there's all kinds of other mental health benefits around the situation too. So I think it's super cool. If you are part of the boomerang generation in one way or the other, comment down below.
Do you want to hear
Do you
my
live
fantasy?
with old people? Comment below.
Fantasy? Who wants to hear my fantasy?
Why did we just transition from living with your grandmother to Neal like, want to hear my fantasy? We got a geezer pleaser over here to my right.
let me tell you my fantasy now.
Wow.
I always thought it'd be so cool if I had like a grandparents that were like basically ultra rich and had a massive mansion.
Okay.
This is your own.
Okay.
You're filling in your own. fantasy into mine.
Okay, go.
No, but I thought it'd be super cool if I had like grandparents that had like a massive mansion.
Yeah, it would be
and
super cool.
just had like super neat. For me, I'm a car freak. Everyone knows that. And they had like super cool, badass old cars, and they were just like, you just live here and take care of the house and us, and you can use the house as you please, and you can use the cars as you please. And I'd be like, it would have been the sickest thing to just have like an 80s like Lambo or something like that and just be able to rip that once in a while and then like come home this big giant house that's like effectively empty for the most part and just be like, yeah, I just take care of this. Like I always thought that'd be the sweetest thing
Being
ever.
a spoiled, gold-digging grandchild was Neal's ultimate
100%.
aspiration.
I like it feels like a movie scene when it's just like, you know what I mean? You get the call and then you're like, yeah, you just cook for them once or whatever a day and then you're chilling in the space.
You know, one thing that I've heard about in some cultures, and I don't want to say which ones because I don't want to get this wrong, but there's a big thing about how grandparents don't leave anything to their own kids. They leave it to their grandchildren. The reason being is...
Oh, yeah, true. I've heard about those.
Two things. One, they don't want to make their own kids lazy. So they say, listen, I'm rich. You're not. You have to go out there and get your own. They also don't want to create conflicts of interest or arguments between their own children. Right? Like who's getting what, blah, 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 who's taking care of the parents. So what they do is they skip a generation and they split it amongst the grandchildren.
Chandler's pissed. You can tell he's getting heated here.
So, damn it, George. No. But I thought that was a really, really interesting way to avoid maybe some of the pitfalls you think of when kids are born into money and they perhaps don't feel as motivated to work and make their own way.
Generational wealth tax.
Generational
That's a separate topic.
Oh, does it? There are tax benefits to sending it to the grandkids?
No, there isn't.
Okay,
Not that I'm aware of. I'm just saying I'm a fan of generational wealth tax.
Yeah. But I thought that's super cool.
Yeah,
They give it to the grandkids and not their own kids.
That is neat.
Yeah.
I didn't get anything from my grandparents.
Yeah. That's why you had these dreams of these imaginary better grandparents that had big houses, fancy cars, and were super hot. Yeah, we get it, Neal.
Okay,
we get
all
it.
right, the last one.
Jeebers.
That last one, I don't know. But anyways, moving on to our next topic. Do I want to talk about ourselves for a little bit?
Isn't that what we do every week?
That is what we do. We just talk about ourselves. But we haven't done a personal update in a while. And I think it's long overdue. Chandler wants to start with a big one that I'm also, he's over here shaking his hands, fired up, celebrating. Go ahead. You announce it, Chandler.
Well, as you guys know, or a lot of you would know that we formed a group, the MKR Group, which is a sales group for our real estate sales business with two partners of ours, Marcus Sampson, Angela Fordrone. And really happy to say, we knew that long term we had confidence in our ability to effectively be the top producing team at Remax at some point in the next 24 months. But we managed to do it in 5 months.
Yeah. So respect.
Boom, boom.
Nice work. Very, very happy with that. Again, anyone who's a client's listening, thank you so much for trusting us to do it. And we're hoping to continue this kind of growth moving forward.
Yeah.
But that was super exciting. I saw the email. They don't say in the email what place you are. But then there's just like
to open
the little
attachment.
PDF is attached, and I'm like, like I started prepping myself in my head. I'm like, you know what? Like, second or third would be sweet. Like, we're just getting into it. Like, this is it.
Number one or bust.
And I opened it, and it was number one. I was like, oh, hells yeah.
if you're not
I was
first,
surprised you
you're
hadn't
last.
called me yet. I was like,
I didn't see it. My emails don't come through from the office. It's very frustrating.
I was so surprised Chandler hadn't called me and started going on about it. But no, I'm super pumped again. I want to thank everyone. And Marcus and Angela, you guys are killing it.
Yeah.
If you guys are listening. And so, more number ones to come.
Yeah, I was like monitoring it because I'm super competitive. It also means we're taken off of the individual accomplishment list, which is sad. We can only get the team accolades.
That's very true.
But we're dominating, and it's because of the trust of clients, and some of whom we've met through this platform. And again, we started this platform not for sales, and I know a lot of other realtors listen to the show, which we love, and we're glad they take something from that, and they give us feedback, and we take from them. But our intent was not to build clients and get clients from this. We just genuinely wanted to add some value to the market and the space and the community.
Nobody else in the office would listen to us. And Chandler and I yap at each other a lot. So this was the only logical step.
My wife doesn't want to hear any of this, so I made a podcast. But we have met clients through this platform, and that's super cool as well. And with that, made friends and all that stuff. So it's very cool. Thanks for the support. That's something that's very much specific to what's going on in our life.
That's how we pay our bills. That's how we do all this. That's how we even pay for this podcast.
It is.
We're not making loads of money here. It's
not
a
enough
work in
you sign up
progress.
for the Patreon.
Yeah. This guy never stops selling. But yeah, on that same note, I also want to thank everyone for listening. The growth of the podcast has been immense in the last, I'd
Love you
say,
guys.
3 to 4 months. And we do love you guys. And it's amazing. You guys are commenting, you're liking, you're messaging us directly, you're calling us, you're texting us, all those things. And it genuinely keeps us going because this is a huge time commitment. I underestimated what it takes to make online content. And by no means are we really like anything amazing at all. And it's such a huge commitment and is like a major endeavor. And so you guys supporting us and kind of giving us a bit of feedback and giving us that support means a lot. And again, I won't say the exact numbers, but I would say our viewership's almost gone up 200% in the last 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're hopefully starting to catch some wind in our sales and we're going to grow with this thing. So
A lot of that's from you guys sharing the
everyone.
podcast and posting on your stories
Yeah.
that you're watching it.
That's huge.
That like we've noticed that, and people even saying things like, "Hey, I listen to it, I stream it, but I'm also going to go on to the
Tag
YouTube video
us.
and light it." But yeah, tag us because sometimes we see it and we like, I don't know how to just take the video and share it. But no, it's been really great. So that was a nice thing that's going on in our lives. But also, you're back in the saddle, Mister. Like, I think I'm going to sit on the sidelines for a while. I'm probably not going to buy anything for a while.
Continuing my personal news, and as Chandler has mentioned,
I'm fired up today. I'm happy.
Chandler is fired up today. I had a coffee today, so I'm wired. I put something under contract.
Yeah, you did. Do we want to talk about what it is?
I wasn't sure if I want to talk about what it is
Maybe
directly
not.
yet because it's but it's not residential.
No.
It doesn't house tenants. It is a real estate play. Once I get further down the line, I'll explain everything and why I did it and what I think is going to come from it. But I've talked about it that I was putting things on pause. I had some concerns on the residential side. I've also mentioned on here multiple times that I don't love buying old inventory. For me, it's not the most satisfying thing in the world. I really want to get into building new. I want to add inventory. I want to try and alleviate some of the issues that are out there. But it is a very difficult task to go into that world. It's very expensive and costly, and you need to have a lot of experience. So I'm trying to get that through buying old inventory. Anyways, in the interim, I have put something under contract. Once I get further down the line and I know for sure that I'm buying it, I will announce it on here, and we will make Patreon episodes about what that looks like. It's going to have a ton of exciting parts that I think you guys will all be interested in learning about and can benefit from. But yeah, so I did get back in the saddle. At the same time, I'm still completing my other residential project that I had started. I think when we last talked, I probably had 7 buildings underway. I've completed 3 of them and refinanced them at low loan to values. I got 60% out on one and 65 and 65 on the others. And to put that in perspective, the same type of building on the same street when rates were low, I pulled out 88%. And these are all 6+ unit buildings, fully renovated and rented for great rental rates. But debt servicing is the concern for all of these banks. And so they're giving me these low loan to values. It's good in some sense because I know I can always debt service and I have the equity there. But it is tough when you're like losing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of equity takeout at low interest rates that you could be utilizing to make more purchases and get involved in other businesses. So that is taking place. Yeah, buying a boat, buying some more cars.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, so again, I'm finishing my residential plays, working on refinancing those. I am starting to look at more residential plays again because I have this. I'm starting to feel more confident. It's funny, they only did 50 basis points. I'm like, everything's fixed now. We're back to it. But I'm on this again where I'm seeing this amount of immigration. I'm like, frig, I don't know if it's ever going to slow down because a lot of the buyers and in the investor world, they're still making money and there's still a lot of aggressive people out there that are buying. And so we might not see a huge pullback. I think the States will. I really do. But I don't know if we're going to see it here.
I saw a tweet. This is going back to something we talked about at the start of the episode with this migration and stuff. I saw a tweet from someone who claims that they spoke to an MP and they said that a big part of this push was, not only just about satisfying the labor demand, but also to help keep housing prices up.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
because they're worried about how much wealth they're costing people because they want to slow down the housing market a little bit, but they mainly want to slow down the rest of the economy. And turning these interest rates is
Housing's
only
not even
so
in the
far hitting the
inflation
housing
thing.
market and doing nothing for anything else.
Yeah.
And ironically, by hitting the housing market like that because of variable products, it's actually making life more expensive for people, not less expensive. So they're realizing, shoot, we need to maintain housing values to some degree. We can't crush them. So anyway, you take that with a grain of salt because that's a
Interesting.
tweet from some guy.
Yeah.
But someone who's connected.
That makes sense.
And was talking to an MP and which is like you can't make that stuff up. They're like, yeah, we don't want inflation. We need to drive stuff down, but we're also going to bring in all these people to keep the price of housing up. It's like, cool.
The levers and dials that you talk about,
Yeah.
the more I dive into this and try and understand what's taking place, there are so many levers and dials and parts at play. That's like, oh, you move this one thing, and then these other two things are impacted. So then you add these couple things in, and then this other thing's impacted. And it is a fine balancing act. And again, I think the guys at the BOC and part of the government are very knowledgeable and know what they're doing. It's just very Chandler's not so sold, but
I hate them.
It's easy to pick on the different parts as they come out. Anyways, back to where I was at. Like I said, finishing my residential stuff. I'm still eventually, hopefully, being optimistic that I can build here. This thing that I have under contract has a building portion.
What do you think you'll get loan to value?
65.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm expecting 65%, maybe. The other thing that I'm seeing take place is I'm starting to get calls again. There is real estate available. And so I'd say that's one of the
people
biggest.
trying to unload some projects.
Yeah, I'd say that is one of the biggest things that I'm seeing in my world. As much like I haven't done that much crazy stuff. I've actually been a bit slower. I've been trying to catch up on a lot of paperwork, my accounting, figuring out where I'm going to go, and really preparing for what is to come. And re-educating myself. I think we talked about this at the year-end podcast is what I regretted not doing, and that was continuing to educate myself. And I did slow down, and so now I'm trying to get back on the horse. So yeah, that I'm just seeing now as I'm doing this, I'm getting a lot of calls without me looking. I'm getting calls from people being like, "Hey, thoughts on this?" Or, "Hey, remember this project we talked about?" And it is kind of satisfying to be like, I remember like really rolling the dice. I'm like, that was $1.4 million when you called me 6 months ago, and now you're willing to take $1.2 million, eh? So
yesterday's price is not today's price.
Yeah, and they seem a little more keen. Before they were really cocky, like, oh, you know what? Okay, so yeah, you can. I'll call somebody else. But now, again, I'm surprised by the volume of those phone calls that I'm getting. On the flip side, from clients and from listeners in the podcast, I'm getting a lot of calls from you guys being like, hey, like I'll scoop some of those up. So I think there are lots of people that are primed and ready as well to pick some of this up, which I think will support the markets, which is, again, where I'm like this back and forth of like, the world is ending, but not in Canada. The world is ending, but not in Canada.
But also, like, there's a price for everything.
Yeah.
Right? And we've said from the jump, like, when this, in this time, there is going to be opportunity, right? Like, this could be an almost generational redistribution of wealth.
Yep.
Within the real estate world, at least, if not in other sectors as well.
Redistributing wealth by taking it away from everybody.
Will you look back? Will you look back at this time and think, well, I'm so glad I just bore down and hoarded my cash and
just bought
and
another car.
There, and which you may be, right? Like you may be, that was the best approach. Or will you look back and say, man, if I could have just grabbed the reins a little bit and gotten aggressive on something when it came back around, like even that 65% loan to value, like at some point when rates come back around, you're going to have, and maybe it's in 3 years, right? You'll pay that down a little bit. You'll have 40% equity in those properties.
Yeah.
Right? And if money does get back cheap,
the value will be even higher. So I might even have like 50% equity in those properties.
Yeah, you'll have 50% equity in those properties at an opportunistic time. And meanwhile you've acquired something else potentially. So I don't know, like we all need to be cautious, but if you can negotiate hard, like you're saying, like you're getting phone calls that were effectively worth $200,000, right? Price has gone down $200,000. That's a $200,000 phone call. It's hard to replicate that value in any other circumstance other than this. So maybe you see some opportunity there. One
thing I am like, and this is where the bigger economics start to come into play. And I think this is what the REITs or the really big landlords start to consider. And I was looking at this is I got an offer for a refi on some of these properties that I'm getting 65% on. I'm getting offers from smaller banks that are willing to do 80-85%. But they're at a little bit higher rates. And I'm like, and they have 5-year lock-in periods. I'm like, I could do for the extra 7-figure payout today. Because it would give me the options to go be aggressive. But then I'm like, wait a second. If I take that money out and rates do come down and now I'm paying 2% more than I would have been if I waited, and then I pay that 2% more for 3 years, what's 2% more on, we'll say, $10 million, right? That's a couple $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's an extra $200,000 a year. And I'm like, wait a second. This is actually getting to a point where I'm like, if I don't deploy that capital effectively, is it worth the $200,000 a year? Is it worth the $600,000 cost?
On $10 million.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's just extra cost.
Yeah.
Like, and so I'm like, holy crap! You got to start.
Or like if you need to break the penalty, if you need to break it and have a massive penalty,
and there's also penalties
and it's
involved.
like, oh, well then anything I would have gained is now offset by that penalty, right? So,
Yes, I know. So I was thinking about this the other day. I'm
yeah.
like, do I do this? Because again, they're pretty keenly offering a bunch of money in it, and I was super excited. And then I was like, wait a second, if I don't make good investments with this, if I don't basically make the $600K, which I should be able to, because you're like, well, it's $10 million, you should be able to make $600K on that, but it's not $10 million because I am already at 65%, so it's going to be an extra few $1 million that effectively cost me that $600,000 extra, right?
Yeah, and it's also like, well, what do they know that we don't? Like, why do they think that, call it 5% interest rate or I don't know, whatever percent.
I think they're horny to give it to me because right now, then they'll be able to have those mortgages that they can then go out and sell.
Yeah. Right.
And in 2 years, to be
yeah.
able to sell a mortgage at 5, 6, 7% is going to be insane because we're going to be back down probably at the 3% range, 4% range. And it's like, you know what I mean? So that extra couple basis points. And like these guys are locked in for 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
they're like, we'll get you in years 3, 4, and 5.
So,
yeah. No, that's interesting.
Anyways,
yeah.
What do you got going on?
I mean, just the same crap, man. I've got the 8-unit building is.
You buy any single families?
I mean, that's your
8,
that's your
6,
gig.
4, 2.
Why don't you buy another lake house that you don't occupy?
I put a rental apartment in the basement. It's also unoccupied, but
so I've got the 8 units. Gosh, I feel like the end is in sight here. Like 2 or 3 of the units are basically ready. Like someone could move into them. The challenge is the hallways are not ready. The entryway is not ready.
We can do a video there?
Yeah, we definitely do. It was the same one that we did a video of way back.
It was all framed up.
Yeah, so we can go in and start seeing some finished product there. Really hoping to have that done by end of year. Which will then allow us to roll literally down the street to a demoed out 6-unit that I have 1 unit occupied because, was a great previous tenant and I wanted to move her back in and blah, blah. So she's like chilling in there. She's got a great situation. She's one person alone in the 6-unit building. And then the 12-unit that I closed on not too long ago, I now have 10 of the 12 vacant with the other 2 coming up vacant here shortly. So I'm starting demo on that project.
You got 10 of 12 vacant on that place already?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And the other 2
Tenant
are
whisperer
leaving.
over here.
Yeah. That went nice and smoothly.
What have you been buying them out with? Cash monies?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I go
Big
through
fat
I go
checks?
through the motion, the DR5, and here are your options, and let's work together on it. So that's gone really, really well. And then the other projects that I picked up again more recently, which is like 18 units and then like duplexes, triplexes, like those are so far on the back burner. I'm just letting them run and chill, and they're out of sight, out of mind. I will visit that project probably a year from now.
Do you have a tally for your 8-unit reno?
Yeah, it's coming in around.
Patreon.
Oh gosh, yeah. We'll bring it all down the Patreon. I mean, all the numbers aren't back yet, so but it's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of budgeted like 35 a door, and it's come in quite a bit higher than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's I see that a lot too. What have you done leasing yet on the 8-unit?
No, I've been reluctant to because of
Vacant buildings are better.
no, but you know how it is. Like the entryway is not finished. The hallways are not finished.
Yeah, so it's hard for someone to stomach that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so whoever's living in there is going to hear work going on. And so here we are. I'd be renting something for December 1st. Like, and I could have 2 or 3 units ready for December 1st.
Yep.
But is it going to be a good experience? Is it going to get people started off on the right foot? I don't know that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next rental date is January 1st, which is just about the worst possible date to occupy units. Like people are not typically looking to move on Boxing Day to their new apartment. Like, so I think now I'm just going to target February and be like, let's see if I can get, a bunch of them ready for February.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Now that you say that, I might try the same on some of my units.
Yeah, it's just a bad first experience. 'Cause people come like, I can't get out of the parking spot because there's a van in the driveway, or like I'm not in the buzzer system yet, or because it's not connected.
Are you sleeping in the van now?
Yeah, yeah. So that's where I'm at. I'm in the van down by the river. Yeah, so a lot of projects underway. Feeling really good. Like I've put a bit more consideration into how I want them to function because I was ignorantly just kind of spending my own money and it was hand to mouth, right? Like, and I'm realized like, listen, you're at the scale now where you should do construction financing on these things, make your life a lot simpler. So I have that in motion to complete the project that I'm on, but also for the next 2 projects as well. So I'm excited to go through that. And it's also good to have like really recent numbers of a project. Like, okay, now we're going to replicate this over there. I'm just going to carbon copy all the numbers, adjust for square footages, and I should be able to have a really airtight quote for
6
for the 6 and then for the 12 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the 6 and 12 will hopefully run kind of simultaneous to one another.
12s are 1 bedrooms?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple.
I saw you had some nice artwork on your parking garage.
Yeah, sweet. Real cool tag.
Yeah.
Real cool tag, bro.
There was a nice little graffiti art on the
Yeah.
roll-up door.
First of all, man, like you don't hit residential spaces. And 2, it's not even any good. It's like some dumb kid.
Look, man, I tried my best.
Looks like you traced it. Yeah, so that's what's new with me. And yeah, I'm trying to, like, this that time of year, like I'm excited for us to do a goal setting and an end of year and all that stuff because there's some few things I want to do differently next year, but I have started to take stock of this past year. I was like, damn, man, this is the most units I've ever acquired in 12 months by like a wide friggin' margin.
Yeah.
And I'm happy about a lot of it, and I've learned a lot. And not to get too nostalgic looking back, we're only here in November, but it is time to start thinking about the new year and blah blah blah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what's new with us. For those of you who have asked, maybe you don't care, but I mean, we haven't checked in on that. We've had a really good run of awesome guests lately and crazy topics to discuss. So, would love to hear from you guys what you're up to. We're going to continue to unpack some of these projects. We'll see what happens with your thing, your purchase. That could be really exciting.
Yeah.
And then I should be, like I said, finishing these. So we'll have some video content on finishing these using units and breaking down the numbers. And yeah, if you're high end, man, it's ridiculous. Like quartz counters, in-unit laundry, heat pumps,
They look
custom
sharp.
decks
The
with
few
all
pictures I've
glass.
seen.
Like
Yeah.
it's coming out really good. Probably a little overkill.
Yeah.
But yeah.
If you're still listening at this point, question for you guys. What would you be interested in hearing from Chandler and I? Would you be interested in hearing more about our buildings? Would you want me to talk maybe about some of the cars that I'm flipping? Would you want Chandler and I to do maybe a competition for making a down payment or something along those lines, where we give you an update every episode on our road to $5,000, starting with $100 or something like that? Give us some ideas. Let us know. I mean,
or maybe like you just want to hear more about Neal's fantasies about his grandparents.
or you can hear my
Tons of great content for the people out there.
Anyways, let us know. Again, we appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Please share our stuff, but tag us and we will reshare the shit out of you.
Yeah.
So again, thanks guys. Peace.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.